So just from the conversation that we've had so far, it sounds like there are no consequences to the attackers. There are few or relatively unknown consequences to the organisations that go through security incidents. The banks will typically cover the losses of individuals that get credit card scammed and all that kind of stuff. So why should we care?
It's a great question, and it's a today question. So today that is a question that makes sense to ask. I think we need to look forward. Every time there is a new thing that turns up, the automobile is a good example. So cars, late 1890s. We didn't really have car safety regulations till the 1970s with Ralph Nader's Dangerous at Any Speed, where car manufacturers were consciously, it appears, making choices that were injuring their consumers because it was more profitable. Software is one of those. Software is just like this. We've gone from software 1950s, 1960s to today, and software still has no regulation around it. We have 1,000-page end-user license agreements, which I defy anyone to have ever read any of.
Or let alone be able to make an informed opinion
or make
on.
any assessment of these things. And so we're living in a world where software doesn't have to do what it says on the tin, doesn't have to work, can crash, and has consequences. And I think we've moved far enough forward to say, maybe it's time that we started regulating this in the same way we do every other critical industry. We want to fly in safe planes, we really do. We want to drive safe cars. In fact, you can't find a car today that doesn't have airbags. The ANCAP rating matters to people. I care that it's a safe car. We have no safety ratings on software. And everything we do today, the whole cyber, is based on software. And without anything that says we independently assure that this thing does what it says, does it in a safe manner, does it repeatably, we're going to go down. You asked, why should we care today? Today, maybe we're making a sensible choice. Maybe we're just balancing those two things. But as software gets bigger and bigger, and Internet of Things is a whole conversation about 50 billion connected devices in the next 10 years, if we take the attitude of today where it doesn't really matter, we don't have to care today, we're making do today, that's okay. I think we can maybe get close to that as a position. But next year and the year after, the doubling of devices, we have an opportunity today to make a difference. We have an opportunity today, not to say stop. Security is now about saying stop. It's about constraining some of the choices we're making and saying if we want to do this in a way that can hurt others, it can hurt them physically in the case of an autonomous car. It could hurt them financially in the case of a payment app. It could hurt them in some other way in the case that their sensitive information gets released. It's now probably time to say, yes, you're allowed to profit from this new software environment we find ourselves in. It's absolutely okay to profit from the mobile world we live in. Noting the iPhone is not quite 10 years old yet everyone lives in a smartphone world. But there are consequences from that. Or we end up doing the strip mining, where we worry about let later generations care about the consequence of our choice. So right now businesses are doing okay-ish, mostly, unless they get breached, at which point they tend to be doing very badly. But if they keep making the same decisions today, where the world is getting faster and more connected, then those decisions are going to stop working. And I don't want businesses to stop innovating and stop going forward, but I want them to do it in a way that we still say safe. And it's not clear that if they keep with today's choices, we're going to end up in that outcome.
Because it is just a case of time before human lives are at stake because some organisation made a risk decision about cyber risk.
I saw a thing in the news about a US state effectively authorising lethal force on police drones. This is one of those, what can possibly go wrong? I think it's fairly obvious what can possibly go wrong. Someone will hack a drone with a gun on it. That's not a future I think I really want to live in. Not today, not ever. And that's a scary forward view of the world. And I think that not saying no is the right answer. I think saying if you need to have a drone which somehow has lethal force, this thing had better be constructed to military grade specs with perfect software that cannot fail ever and is completely controllable. Otherwise, it will be very, very shortly that, oops, the criminals took over the drone fleet with the guns on them, and that's just not a future I really want to live in.
It's certainly the choices that we make, we need to make with some level of understanding and knowledge. And I think that that's currently not necessarily the case all the time. And so you're talking about what's wrong with the way the world is at the moment. Well, I think there are consequences both individually, organisationally and societally that where we're making choices, ill-informed decisions on some occasion, and it might be because we lack the knowledge, or it might be we lack the skill, or it might be we don't understand the context of the decision we're making. We don't realise how important this particular piece of information is, for instance, or that system, or whatever, as Phil just pointed out. You've got drones, that's great. You Google, well, Amazon arrives, your books arrive by drone, fantastic. However, the drone's got a gun on it, slightly more challenging in terms of my level of comfort with things flying over my head.
We are in Robocop territory now.
It is. And that's what we're seeing. But if we have an understanding that this is not going away, and we can't bury our heads in the sand about this, we've got to start owning some of the choices. And to do that, we've got to make sure that we understand the choice. And I think that's where we can make some difference. We can start to shift how people think about risk in terms of the things that we need to live our lives. We need the food and water and shelter and those low-level things in the Maslow pyramid of needs or whatever, but when hierarchy of needs. When we move forward, we want to be able to make choices about, using our mobile phones to check in on planes, to download content, to do all sorts of really useful things as part of our everyday life. But we're doing that in a framework where those choices we make come with some sort of risk. And do we mind if somebody else checks in as us? That would be annoying. But hang on a minute, if we got some of these apps of processing our medical data, I have family members who have insulin pumps embedded, the data is being collected real time and being transmitted back to the doctors, who can also change the insulin dispense dosage remotely. Now we're starting to go, hang on a minute, what happens if somebody else, people could certainly die of insulin overdosing, or they go into diabetic shock because they're not getting insulin they need because the dosage has shifted. Or it could be an accidental thing. The software could fail and this could happen. As Phil pointed out, we don't have that assurance that the software that we rely on is necessarily always fit for purpose.
It's funny, isn't it? Because there's an entire conversation there around consequences that it's hard to have without sounding like you're being Chicken Little and that the sky's falling. But, the facts of the matter are ransomware, while not being new, over the last 2 to 3 years has absolutely smashed organisations in Australia. And so there's been this flood of money in the form of bitcoins and so on, heading out to organised crime and helping, fund whatever nefarious activities they're up to. But we don't want to have that conversation because we don't want to look like we're just doing the fear, uncertainty and doubt thing. We don't want to talk about hyper-connected, Internet of Things and drones and so on, because we don't want to sound like we're catastrophizing.
Ransomware was a completely predictable consequence. The criminals are spending a lot of time stealing credit cards. They got very good at stealing credit cards. They got very good at monetising stealing credit cards. And the banking sector went, enough, we need to address this. Chip and PIN addressed that really strongly. PCI has certainly helped along the way. And so it's been really hard to monetise credit card theft anymore. So the criminals have just found another thing. And so ransomware is the next thing. It's not that it's special or different, it's just a way that we're not protecting. I'm fairly sure we will find a way of addressing ransomware in the next year or two. There'll be a startup in Silicon Valley that makes $1 gajillion selling an anti-ransomware approach that will work, because today most approaches don't work. And then the criminals will find the next thing to do. The criminal element is going to be there the whole time. What we need to do is be, as best we can, ahead of it, or at least on top of it, rather than going, oh, how could we possibly have imagined this would occur? A lot of us did imagine it would occur, but no one wanted to hear because they were protecting their credit cards. Now they're caring about ransomware. What they're not caring about is the next thing. CEO fraud, business email compromise is the next way of monetising that. And once ransomware is dealt with, that becomes the next one. And then there'll be another one.
But it's foreseeable that criminals will be looking for ways of monetising their skills.
Absolutely.
the problem we've got is that we're never, whilst it would be nice to be in front of the game, in front of this curve, but we're not. We're always going to be behind. So we have to accept that we're always defending as opposed to being able to go on the front foot, and therefore our strategies need to reflect that we won't be able to prevent every attack in the future. We can't prevent every attack now. So we've got to have a multi-layered strategy about how we're doing this, and some of that is about being able to respond to some of these things in a more timely manner, or making better choices when we're responding. Certainly, when we have incidents, that first initial period of incident evaluation, when you're trying to assess what really went wrong, you can make some choices that cost your organisation a lot of money, or a lot of time, or a loss of service for an extended period of time, just in trying to manage, with the best intentions, you're trying to manage the incident response. So we have to accept that the world we live in, we're not going to be able to protect against everything that comes up, because as Phil said, that people will find ways of monetising some of these cyber attacks that are occurring, and we have to be conscious of the fact that what we want to do is be aware, and it's the awareness, it's being cyber aware if we want to start to toss that.
Throw cyber into every sentence.
Yeah.